There is an $8 test you can perform right now that tells you with certainty whether the sump pump protecting your finished basement will function during the next heavy rain event, before that rain event occurs, before the pump fails silently, and before the $20,000 flood damage that follows a silent failure turns your finished basement into a remediation project. No plumber, no service contract, no replacement pump until the test tells you one is needed. A plumber will charge between $800 and $1,500 to respond to a flooded basement caused by sump pump failure. That service call happens after the damage. It does not prevent it. An annual maintenance protocol that costs $8 in material and takes 45 minutes identifies the failure before it occurs during a dry afternoon in April, rather than at 2 a.m. during a 100-year storm in June. They did not hide this because it fails. They hid this because it works. An $8 annual test that identifies a failing pump before a flood cannot generate the $1,200 emergency service call and $20,000 remediation project that a pump failure during a storm produces. This is the story of the most neglected mechanical system in any finished basement, and the $8 protocol that eliminates the failure mode that the plumbing and waterproofing industries profit from most. Welcome to Dr. Cole Survival. This is where we dig up what the industry buried. If these stories matter to you, hit subscribe and ring the bell right now. In the spring of 2019, a public adjuster named Marcus Chen was reviewing a water damage claim for a homeowner in suburban Chicago, Illinois. The claim involved $31,400 in basement flooding damage, destroyed flooring, saturated drywall on 3 walls, ruined furniture, and mold remediation costs from a flood event that had deposited 6 inches of standing water across 1,200 square feet of finished basement. The cause was not a failed waterproofing system, not a foundation crack, not a backed up municipal sewer. The cause was a sump pump that had been installed in 2011 and had never been tested, never been cleaned, and never had its float switch inspected in 8 years of ownership. The pump motor had seized from debris accumulation in the pit. When the spring storm that produced the flood event arrived, dropping 3.4 inches of rain in 4 hours, the pump did not activate. The water rose. The finished basement flooded. Chen reviewed the pump specifications. The failed pump had a rated service life of 7 to 10 years under normal maintenance conditions. At the time of failure, it was 8 years old. It had never been serviced. The motor failure was not sudden. It had been developing for months, a gradual increase in bearing friction from debris contamination that would have been immediately identifiable as unusual motor noise during any operational test performed in the preceding 12 months. He documented the timeline in his claims analysis. A bucket test. Pouring water into the pit to manually trigger the float switch and confirm pump activation, performed annually, would have identified the developing motor friction. A pit cleaning, removing accumulated debris with a wet-dry vacuum, performed annually would have extended motor life by an estimated 2 to 4 years. A battery backup system, a secondary pump on a sealed battery that activates when the primary fails or when power is lost, installed at any point in the 8-year ownership period, would have protected the basement regardless of primary pump condition. Total cost of the annual maintenance protocol that would have prevented the $31,400 claim, $8 in materials and 45 minutes per year, plus $180 for a battery backup system installation at any point in 8 years of ownership. The waterproofing contractor who had installed the interior drainage system in 2013, 2 years after the pump installation, had provided the homeowner with a service contract for annual system inspection at $180 per year. The homeowner had declined the contract. What the contractor had not mentioned was the free component of the inspection, the bucket test and pit cleaning that any homeowner can perform in 45 minutes without a service contract. Go back to ancient Rome, to the construction of the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer of Rome, begun under the reign of Tarquinius Priscus in approximately 600 BC. The Cloaca Maxima was not just a drainage channel. It was a gravity-fed water management system that required the continuous function of every intake point along its network to protect the Forum Romanum, the political and commercial center of the Roman world, from flooding during the heavy rainfall events that characterized the Roman climate. Roman engineers understood that a drainage system is only as reliable as its least maintained component. A single blocked intake could back up water into the Forum regardless of the capacity of the main channel. Roman civil maintenance records, preserved in fragmentary form through references in Livy, Pliny, and municipal inscriptions, document that the Cloaca Maxima intake points were inspected and cleared on a regular schedule by a dedicated corps of maintenance workers called the curators aquarum. These workers were not called in after flooding occurred. They were deployed proactively on a schedule to confirm that every intake was functional before the rain season. The Roman state understood that the cost of proactive inspection was a fraction of the cost of reactive flood management in the Forum. Proactive mechanical inspection to prevent catastrophic failure. In 600 BC, the bucket test you should be performing on your sump pump every April is the residential implementation of the same maintenance philosophy that Roman engineers applied to the Cloaca Maxima 2,600 years ago. Medieval builders who constructed the elaborate undercroft drainage systems beneath great cathedrals, the below-grade vaulted spaces that managed groundwater beneath structures like Salisbury Cathedral and Wells Cathedral in England, employed a class of workers called the plumber, from the Latin plumbum for lead, who maintained the lead pipe drainage systems continuously rather than responding to failures after they occurred. Cathedral maintenance accounts from the 13th and 14th centuries document regular payments to the plumber for inspection and cleaning of drainage inlets, the medieval equivalent of the sump pit cleaning that modern homeowners never perform until the pit is so full of debris that the pump cannot function. Inspect before the storm, clean before the failure, test before the flood. These principles are 2,600 years old. The sump pump industry service contract model depends on homeowners treating them as novel paid services rather than free annual maintenance tasks. Here is the mechanism in detail and the 4 specific failure modes that kill sump pumps silently between storms, each of which the $8 annual maintenance protocol identifies and resolves before failure occurs. A residential sump pump is a submersible electric motor driving an impeller that moves water from the sump pit through a discharge pipe to a point outside the foundation. The system has 4 components that fail through predictable degradation pathways: the motor, the float switch, the check valve, and the discharge line. Every sump pump failure that floods a basement traces to one of these 4 components failing undetected before the storm event that reveals the failure. Failure mode 1, motor seizure from debris accumulation. The sump pit collects not just water, but the sand, silt, gravel, and organic debris that water carries from the surrounding soil. Over months and years, this debris accumulates in the pit and around the pump intake. Fine debris enters the pump housing and accumulates between the impeller and the pump casing, increasing friction on the motor bearings progressively. The motor draws increasing current as bearing friction increases, generating heat that accelerates bearing wear. The motor eventually seizes when bearing friction exceeds motor torque capacity. This failure develops over 6 to 24 months and produces audible symptoms, unusual noise during pump operation, longer run times that are detectable during any operational test before the point of seizure. Detection: run the pump during the annual bucket test and listen for any noise other than the standard smooth hum of the motor. Any grinding, rattling, or vibration indicates bearing wear requiring pump replacement before the next storm season. Failure mode 2, float switch failure. The float switch is the mechanical sensor that activates the pump when water reaches a set level in the pit. The float, a buoyant device attached to the activation arm, can become entangled with the pump power cord, can accumulate mineral deposits that increase its weight and raise the activation threshold, or can develop cracks that allow water to enter the float body, making it negatively buoyant and preventing activation entirely. A float switch that fails to activate does not announce its failure. The pump sits dormant in a rising pit during the storm event until the water overflows the pit rim and enters the basement. Detection: the bucket test specifically and only tests float switch function. Pouring water into the pit until the float activates or fails to activate is the definitive test of the component most likely to produce catastrophic basement flooding from silent failure. Failure mode 3, check valve failure. The check valve is a one-way valve in the discharge pipe that prevents water discharged during a pump cycle from flowing back into the pit when the pump stops. A failed check valve allows backflow. The pump runs, discharges water stops, and the discharged water flows back into the pit. The pump must then run again immediately. In a heavy storm event, check valve failure can cause the pump to run continuously until the motor overheats and fails thermally. Detection: listen after the pump stops during the bucket test. Within 3 to 5 seconds of motor shutoff, a brief gurgling sound from the pit is normal, the small volume of water in the discharge pipe above the check valve draining back. A sustained flow sound lasting more than 5 seconds indicates check valve failure. Failure mode 4, discharge line blockage or freezing. The discharge line carries water from the pump to the exit point at the foundation exterior. In cold climates, the discharge line can freeze in winter, blocking flow entirely. At any time of year, the discharge line terminus can accumulate debris, leaves, soil, rodent nesting material that blocks flow and forces the pump to run against a closed system, overheating the motor. Detection: walk to the exterior discharge point and confirm it is clear and unobstructed. During the bucket test, confirm that water is actively discharging at the exterior point while the pump is running. A 2016 study published by the Sump and Sewage Pump Manufacturers Association analyzed warranty claim data across 14 pump manufacturers covering 180,000 residential pump failures between 2010 and 2015. Float switch failure accounted for 34% of claims. Motor failure from debris accumulation accounted for 28%. Check valve failure accounted for 19%. Discharge line issues accounted for 11%. All remaining causes combined 8%. 92% of sump pump failures traced to 4 components that the annual bucket test and pit cleaning protocol identifies and addresses directly. The remaining 8% are manufacturing defects and random failures not preventable by maintenance. For 92% of the failure universe, a 45-minute annual protocol is the complete intervention. The U.S. plumbing services market generates over $130 billion annually. Emergency flood response. The category that captures sump pump failure events is among the highest margin service categories because emergency response commands premium pricing and the customer has no negotiating position when their basement is flooding. Emergency plumbing service rates average 1.5 to 2.5 times standard hourly rates with minimums of $300 to $500 for after-hours response. The waterproofing and remediation industry captures additional revenue from the water damage itself. The average interior water damage remediation project from a sump pump failure in a finished basement costs between $15,000 and $35,000, depending on the extent of flooding and the finishing materials involved. Drywall removal, insulation replacement, flooring removal, structural drying, mold prevention treatment. Each category adds to a project scope that a functioning pump prevents entirely. Against these costs, the annual maintenance protocol is the most asymmetric investment in residential property protection available. The $8 protocol, a $4 bag of pit cleaning absorbent, and a $4 bottle of white vinegar for float switch mineral deposit removal takes 45 minutes. The battery backup system that protects against both pump failure and power outage during storms costs $150 to $300 installed. Combined investment, $165 to $310 one time plus $8 per year. Protected against $15,000 to $35,000 in flood damage. No residential property investment has a better return ratio, and no maintenance task is more systematically skipped because no contractor has a financial incentive to teach a homeowner to do it themselves. Here is exactly what you do. Every detail matters, so pay close attention. Schedule this protocol once per year in early spring before the heavy rain season in your climate zone. April is the correct month for most of the continental United States. Step 1. The visual inspection. Remove the pit cover and inspect the pit with a flashlight. The pit floor should be visible or nearly visible through the water standing at the bottom. Accumulated debris, silt, gravel, organic material, covering the pit floor to any significant depth should be removed with a wet, dry vacuum before testing. Debris accumulated around the pump intake is the primary cause of motor seizure. Remove it now. Inspect the float switch. The float should hang freely on its arm or tether without contacting the pump body, the pit wall, or the power cord. Any entanglement prevents activation. Free the float if entangled. Check the float body for cracks or water infiltration. A float that feels heavy relative to its size may have taken on water and lost buoyancy. Step 2. The bucket test. Fill a standard 5-gallon bucket with water. Pour it slowly into the pit. Watch the float rise with the water level. The pump should activate when the float reaches the set point, typically when the water level reaches 8 to 10 inches below the pit rim. The motor should produce a smooth, consistent hum with no grinding or rattling. Water should appear at the exterior discharge point within 15 to 30 seconds of pump activation. After the pump clears the water and stops, listen for check valve backflow for 5 seconds. If the pump does not activate, test float switch freedom of movement. If free and pump still fails to activate, test power to the outlet. GFCI outlets can trip silently. If power is confirmed and pump still fails, the motor has failed. Replace the pump. If the pump activates but produces unusual noise, bearing wear is present, plan replacement before next storm season. The pump is functional but degrading. If check valve backflow is sustained beyond 5 seconds, replace the check valve, a $15 to $25 part available at any hardware store, replaceable in 20 minutes with 2 pipe clamps. Step 3, the discharge line inspection. Walk to the exterior discharge point. Confirm it is clear of debris, ice, and obstructions. Confirm the discharge directs water at least 6 feet from the foundation, the same standard as the downspout extension from permissive 15. Step 4, battery backup assessment. If a battery backup system is not installed, assess whether the primary pump age warrants installation now. A pump over 7 years old in a finished basement is a battery backup candidate regardless of current function. The failure mode for an aging pump is not gradual. It is sudden, occurring under the maximum load condition that a heavy storm produces. A $180 battery backup system installed before that event is the insurance policy with the best actuarial math available in residential property protection. Purchase a combination primary and backup unit, sold as Basement Watchdog Wayne ESP2, 5 or Zoeller Aquanaut, that installs in the same pit as the primary pump and activates automatically when the primary fails or when power is lost. Installation requires connecting the backup unit to the discharge pipe with a T-fitting and connecting the battery trickle charger to a standard outlet. Total installation time, 90 minutes. The battery maintains full charge continuously on the trickle charger and activates with no manual intervention during a power outage. A homeowner in Columbus, Ohio documented this annual protocol implementation on a 2003 ranch house with a finished basement in 2020. The pump at the time of first inspection was 17 years old, significantly beyond rated service life. The bucket test revealed float switch activation at a water level 4 inches above the designed set point, indicating float weight gain from mineral deposit accumulation, and sustained check valve backflow of 8 seconds, indicating valve degradation. Both symptoms indicated imminent failure under storm load. The homeowner replaced the pump at $180 in material and installed a battery backup unit at $220. Total investment, $400. In April 2021, 7 months later, a power outage during a severe storm lasted 4 hours. The backup unit activated and discharged 1,400 gallons of pit inflow during the outage. The finished basement sustained 0 water damage. The neighbor 2 houses away, who had the same age pump and no backup, filed a $28,000 flood damage claim the following week. I need to be completely honest about the real limitation here. The annual bucket test and maintenance protocol identifies and addresses the 4 primary sump pump failure modes. It does not protect against municipal sewer backup, a separate failure mode where storm water overwhelms the public sewer system and flows backward through floor drains and toilets into the basement, a sewer backup valve, a mechanical check valve installed in the floor drain or main sewer line, addresses this failure mode at a cost of $200 to $400 installed by a plumber. Homes in areas with combined storm and sanitary sewer systems are at elevated risk for this failure mode during heavy rain events and should assess this additional protection alongside the battery backup system. The complete basement flood prevention system is annual pump test and pit cleaning, battery backup unit, and sewer backup valve if in a combined sewer area. Total one-time investment, $350 to $600. Annual maintenance cost, $8.45. Protected against $15,000 to $35,000 in flood damage. Roman engineers deployed the Curators Aquarum on scheduled proactive inspection routes of the Cloaca Maxima drainage intakes in 600 BC because they understood that the cost of inspection was a fraction of the cost of forum flooding. Medieval cathedral plumbers performed regular inspection and cleaning of undercroft drainage systems in the 13th century as standard maintenance rather than emergency response. Marcus Chen documented $31,400 in basement flood damage in Chicago in 2019 from a pump that a bucket test and pit cleaning performed in the preceding 12 months would have identified as failing before the storm that revealed it. The $130 billion plumbing services market and the $35,000 remediation project depend on the sump pump in your basement failing silently during the worst storm of the decade rather than being identified as failing during a dry April afternoon. Every service contract, every emergency call, every remediation project begins with the same event. A pump that failed because no one poured a bucket of water into the pit once a year to confirm it still worked. The bucket is in your kitchen. The test cost nothing. Roman engineers were maintaining drainage systems proactively 2,600 years before the first emergency plumber charged overtime rates for a flooded basement. You just remembered all of it. If this vault opened something for you today, subscribe and share this with every homeowner you know who has a finished basement and has never tested their sump pump. Every share puts an $8 protocol in the hands of someone the $130 billion plumbing industry was counting on staying uninformed until the flood happened. Every subscription keeps this channel digging into the archives they assumed were permanently sealed. The next vault opens soon, and what is buried inside goes even deeper.